Hi everyone, it's Jordan again, and for today I want to read part of a sermon to you. This is actually a sermon that my dad heard and he told me about, so thank you, Dad, for telling me about this and sending it to me. And it starts out talking about the Golden Gate Bridge and how it was originally built. So last week we talked about the gold rush in Montana, and this week we're talking about the building of the Golden Gate Bridge. I bet you guys did not know that there were so many history lessons that y'all were going to learn from me when you turn these vlogs on. You guys are very, very welcome for those little bits of historical information. So let's get on to it. The building of the Golden Gate Bridge. During the initial stages of the construction, this is actually a very sad story to start with. 23 workers fell off the bridge and sadly died. So finally, about halfway through the project, I honestly have no idea why it took that long, but halfway through the project, a large net was finally put underneath the bridge. After that net was put there, only 10 men in total fell, and none of them died because all of them were caught by that safety net. Since they knew now that their safety wasn't in question because the net was there to catch them if they fell, the workers were able to work with so much more freedom and effectiveness and efficiency because they knew they would be caught. Maybe some of you can see where this is going. He then says next that God has stretched beneath us, extending from eternity past to eternity future, is God's grace, assuring every believer that we can never fall past the grace of God. She describes grace as the hand of God that is ready to catch us when we fall. In other words, that same safety net that caught all of the workers and gave them so much more freedom and so much more effectiveness. She likens that here to the grace of God that catches us when we fall. I also want to read another devotional. This book was given to me by a very sweet friend, and I have been reading through it, and it's called Grace Saves Us. I want to share it with you because I think it ties in very well to this sermon. It says, "The same grace that saves us is the grace that keeps us. It is not just grace to cover sin, it is grace more than sufficient to overcome every sin and every weakness. Grace enables us to live as more than conquerors, day in and day out, no matter what. There is always grace to begin anew." And that phrase, more than conquerors, is taken from Romans, I believe it's Romans 8:37, which used to be one of my favorite verses. You might have heard me talk on it. It says, we are more than conquerors through what? Through him who loved us. We're not more than conquerors on our own power or on our own strength, because we have weaknesses. We fall, we fail, we mess up. Even when we think we're doing well, sometimes we're still failing and we maybe can't even see it right away. But God's grace is what allows us to be conquerors and what allows us to live in that freedom. You've heard me talk about probably the freedom of knowing Christ and being a follower of Christ. That freedom is not because of anything that we've done to change our lives. It's not because we've suddenly said the right things or done the right things and become more powerful in just ourselves. It's because of God's grace. That's God's grace that allows us all of those things. I've heard it said once that mercy is not getting what we deserve, but grace is being given what we don't deserve. I'm going to say that again because I know that it's a subtle difference and it confused me the first couple times too. Mercy is not getting what we deserve. Grace is being given what we don't deserve. Both of those God does for us in abundance, right? I'm not going to sit here and say that, mercy is less than, or mercy doesn't matter. I'm not trying to say that. But think about the idea of that grace, being given what we don't deserve. Think what a gift that is. And think about the ways right now that God's grace has touched you or has caught you, or the gifts that God's grace has given you or enabled you to step into. Think about those. Thank God for each of those. And then think about the way that God calls us to treat that grace. And I want to be careful here because I feel like as I was actually preparing this, I thought to myself, you know, it's coming across a little bit like I'm saying, or like God, like this message is saying, you know what, grace has got you, so go do whatever you want to do. Go live however you want to live. And no matter what, it'll be all right. And I don't want to make that point. I don't want to say that, because we do not want that grace that we've been given. That's a gift from God. And as his followers, we don't want to abuse it, right? We don't want to turn our backs on it and say, okay, if you've got me, then I'm just going to go do whatever I want. No. We don't want to do that. We want to accept the gift. We want to thank God for that gift that is there for us always, but we still want to do everything that we can to serve God and to follow God. And we don't want to abuse it. So thank God for the gift of his grace, and think about all the ways that it has affected you today. Something that I've learned preparing this is that, man, that grace stretches way further than I even knew, than I even thought. A really good verse is that God's grace is sufficient for us, for his power is made perfect in our weakness. That grace, once we're followers of Christ, that grace covers all of our weakness. It covers all of our mistakes. It covers everything. That grace is so, so great. That's why the great hymn says it truly is amazing grace. I hope that today you take time to think about that grace in your life and thank God for it. And I will do the same. God is good all the time. Love you guys.